All right, welcome back. As you gear up for your CSS exams, understanding environmental degradation is absolutely non-negotiable. Today, we're unpacking one of the most critical threats to our region right now, air pollution. Think of this explainer as your ultimate revision guide. We're going to walk through the hard science, the ground realities here in Pakistan, and of course, the policy solutions. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Defining the threat, 2. Types of air pollutants, 3. Where pollution comes from, 4. Devastating impacts on health, and finally, 5. How we fight back. Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, Defining the Threat. What exactly is in the air we breathe? For your exam revision, you'll want to lock in this exact definition. Air pollution is the presence of harmful substances from natural and human-made sources in the air, posing a threat to human health, the environment, and the economy. But look, the crucial takeaway here is that this isn't just an ecological issue, right? It's a massive economic drain. When our air is contaminated, it places this huge compounding burden on our national healthcare system, eating up state resources and really tanking overall national productivity. Moving right along to Section 2, Types of Air Pollutants. Let's break down these invisible threats into gaseous, particulate, and beyond. When you're categorizing these gaseous pollutants for your papers, pay attention to their unique risks in our local context. Take carbon monoxide, that's heavily tied to our severe urban traffic congestion and incomplete fuel combustion. Then you've got nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide. In our region, these are the massive byproducts of localized industrial zones and our heavy reliance on low-grade fossil fuels. They actually mix with atmospheric moisture to create acid rain. And finally, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These come from industrial solvents and vehicle exhaust, carrying terrible risks, everything from instant respiratory irritation to, over time, systemic liver and kidney damage. Now, beyond the gases, we absolutely have to talk about particulate matter. You need to clearly distinguish between coarse and fine particles. PM10, the coarse stuff, mostly comes from unchecked construction dust and agricultural activities. But PM2.5, wow, that is the real danger. These fine particles from vehicle exhaust and combustion are the primary drivers behind those hazardous AQI levels we see during the winter Lahore smog crisis. Because they are literally microscopic, they bypass your body's natural defenses, penetrating deep into the lungs and causing severe cardiovascular distress. To really ace this topic, you also have to factor in chemical byproducts. Ground-level ozone, for instance, doesn't just damage our lungs, it seriously damages our critical crop yields. Then there's ammonia, which acts as a severe irritant, mostly stemming from massive agricultural operations. And we can't forget heavy metals like mercury and lead. Unregulated industrial waste disposal across the country is letting these toxins enter our local ecosystems, leading to tragic outcomes like permanent neurological damage and birth defects. All right, on to Section 3, where pollution comes from. Let's trace the source. Our everyday infrastructure makes up the vast majority of human-driven emissions, which, as a future policymaker, should be your main target. Fossil fuel combustion is the biggest culprit here, made way worse by unregulated traffic and power generation. In our industrial sector, a glaring local failure is the traditional brick kiln industry. So many of them are still operating without that cleaner zigzag technology. And in agriculture, alongside heavy pesticide use, the seasonal crop stubble burning in Punjab releases absolute mountains of coarse particulates straight into our shared atmosphere. Of course, nature plays a role too. Volcanic eruptions, wildfires, and regional dust storms contribute significantly. But note this down for your exams, these natural events are largely beyond our immediate regulatory control. Your focus for environmental policy and administrative reform has to be on mitigating those human-made sources we just talked about, because that's where state intervention can actually make a difference. So, we know what it is and where it comes from. But what actually happens to our local population when we breathe this in day after day? Let's explore that in Section 4, Devastating Impacts on Health, looking at the biological and environmental toll. The systemic attack on the human body is terrifying, and it perfectly matches our public health data. Sure, the respiratory impacts are obvious, but the cardiovascular spike is what's truly alarming. Those tiny PM2.5 particles trigger heart attacks and strokes, aligning exactly with the massive surge in hospital admissions we see during peak smog seasons in our major urban centers. It's literally a full-body assault. We're talking severe neurological damage, cognitive impairment, and a long-term public health crisis that is just bleeding our medical resources dry. And the environmental fallout is just as bad, but it requires you to understand the stark contrasts between urban and rural impacts. While our cities are choking on dense smog, suffering from terrible visibility and immediate respiratory issues, our rural areas are facing a completely different, silent catastrophe. Acid rain and eutrophication are destroying the rural agricultural backbone of our economy. They ruin soil chemistry, deplete oxygen in the water, and ultimately threaten our entire national food security. So, how do we fix it? Section 5, How We Fight Back. We'll cover the solutions and control measures. Okay, administrative reform is your bread and butter here. Without a rock-solid legal framework, voluntary changes just do not work. We have to critique our current government emission monitoring, or rather the lack of it. There are massive legal loopholes hindering effective pollution control in Pakistan right now. I'm talking about incredibly weak enforcement of the PIPA guidelines and a total lack of continuous emission monitoring systems. Contrast this with successful international clean air initiatives, where rigorous automated monitoring and strict legal enforcement actually force major industrial offenders to pay the price. On the industrial side, we have the engineering to physically stop these pollutants. Scrubbers and electrostatic precipitators inside smokestacks can strip out the toxic gases. But the reality? We have specific, localized technological failures where factories simply bypass these scrubbers because of corruption and zero regulatory oversight. Looking ahead, the only true long-term solution for our energy crisis and pollution levels is to aggressively transition the nation towards solar and wind power, designing systems that produce zero toxic waste from the get-go. We also desperately need to rethink our transportation policy. Think about it. Our local fuel standards often still rely on low-grade, high-sulfur fuels. We have to contrast that against global best practices like the Euro 5 and Euro 6 standards. To really move the needle, we need massive investment in electric vehicle infrastructure across the country. Upgrading those fuel standards and maximizing our public transit networks are absolutely crucial steps to cutting out that massive urban combustion sector we discussed earlier. Finally, fighting pollution isn't just a top-down approach. It requires huge public action. Proper waste management is critical. Right now, a prevalent local issue is the open burning of solid municipal waste in our neighborhoods, which shoots VOCs and particulate matter straight into the air we breathe. We need robust, widespread public education campaigns. When people actually understand the causes and effects, it empowers them to make sustainable individual lifestyle choices, like adopting recycling and demanding civic accountability that collectively help clear the skies. We've covered a lot today, from the core sources and the crushing toll on our healthcare system, all the way to the critical administrative reforms needed to fix this mess. So, as future policymakers, I'll leave you with this question. With all the technological and regulatory tools at our disposal, are we prepared to close those legal loopholes and make the necessary changes to finally clear the air we breathe? Think critically about these policies for your exams. Keep up the hard work, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.